The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and to get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to EPARTRADE.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Good morning from California. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of EPARTRADE. Welcome to Race Industry Now, the technical and business webinar series from EPARTRADE presented by ARP. With me this morning is Judy Keane, the co-founder of EPARTRADE, and the one and only Jeff Hammond. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Wonderful today. Thanks.
Great.
No, I'm doing wonderful too. Just got back from Indy, Francis, and had a very unique weekend, to say the least, with all the ups and downs and ins and outs. But as you folks could appreciate, it's still Indy, and when you're at the racetrack, it's hard not to feel like you're in awe of all the history that's ever been made there.
It's definitely a place. So yeah, I saw that you were there. So excellent. And well, welcome back. We missed you last week. So we had Brad Gilly. And so today we are going to bring on our good friend, Chris Thompson from Dragonfly Performance. We have a long story with Chris. And then Judy, we got some good news this week too, right?
Yes, since we have announced our second annual Race Industry Week, I have been contacted by many suppliers. I'm holding space during that week. So it's exciting to hear the suppliers excited about it. But at the same time, we have a lot of attendees registering every single day.
So yeah, Jeff, this is going to be the season finale of Race Industry Now. That's the new thing this year. So the full week. Right. Excellent. So I'm getting a signal from our producer, Reed Keneski. We're going to bring our panelists on. So I think we are going to see them coming up quickly. So I see Andy coming up. I see Chris Thompson, and Nick is there as well. So good morning, guys. Mr. Thompson. Chris, you're on mute. There we are. So
there we are.
Excellent.
How are you guys? Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see all of you virtually. Jeff,
good to see you.
I think we got Nick and we are missing Andy, and we'll wait for Andy. And when we are good to go, we'll let you take over, Mr. Hammond. So
sounds like a good idea.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think Andy is coming on. So Jeff, you'll take over and we'll see you guys in about 55 minutes.
Appreciate it. We'll see you folks a little bit later, and y'all enjoy your morning coffee and donuts and everything. But good morning, Mr. Thompson. How are you?
Yeah, Jeff, I'm doing good. Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you guys this morning. I'm glad to have my friends Andy and Nick with me as well to help out.
Well, good morning, Andy. And I haven't seen Nick yet, but at the same time, looking forward to speaking with both of you gentlemen. So, guys, as you know, we're here to talk about your product, your company, and your experiences when it comes to Dragonfly and the things that you do best, especially for the racing and competitive side of, well, I probably shouldn't say that. Any kind of a high performance type of race, of a wire, I should say, spark plug wire. And again, what you've been able to do for it. So who wants to lead out here this morning and kind of start guiding this thing or have an opening statement? Otherwise, I'm gonna hit you with a question right on the get-go.
No, that's great. I'll start, Jeff, and thank you very much. I am the business development consultant for Dragonfly Performance. Dragonfly, we launched that about 3 years ago in 2018 with the need to fill the niche of the performance side aspect of the industry, whereas the ignition side is not sexy. As we all know, ignition is just a part of the engine that just needs to have something done. It just delivers that spark energy. It just needs to do it efficiently. Now, we saw that as a resurgence that come around where some limelight could be put back on the ignition systems themselves, because we feel that that has been really kind of neglected over the years. The larger companies that were years ago, decades ago, they've built themselves up, have really kind of set themselves on cruise control for what we felt. And I think that there's been an advancement both in the technology that can be used in the products themselves, but also in the business aspect and how we go to business to help our builders and our suppliers. So with EPARTRADE, we really felt that this was a unique opportunity to use this new platform, since it is business to business. Not only can we speak about what we've done to change our products, to make them more reliable, more durable, and to perform a little bit better, but also what we're doing parallel to that and delivering a well-rounded business model that serves the builders, WDs, and shops alike very well, as much better than what they've come to expect in the most recent years. So you'll see as we go through this, not only will I, Nick, and Andy speak about some of our own anecdotal experiences, but we'll also I will talk a little bit about how we've designed the business with that same concept and that same mindset that we use both in our product development and put that into our business development too. So it's really what has driven Dragonfly Performance to become a reputable name in the industry in a very short amount of time.
Well, Andy, from the competitor side of it, why don't you give us your opening comments so we can kind of get geared up here for the rest of the hour?
Well, basically, my experience is trackside experience. I don't do a lot of research per se on ignition technology and advancements and stuff like that. I just like spark wires that don't burn up on the track. And that's been sort of a trial and tribulation type situation. We started out with rubber boot ends and heat sleeve on there. And even with the heat sleeve, it would still burn up the rubber boot ends. Eventually, they came out with the ceramic ends on the market, like you see from Dragonfly. And I'd like to reiterate kind of what Chris said about kind of everybody being on cruise control since, I want to say, about 2015, 2016. There really hasn't been any innovations in the market as far as a ceramic plug-in. Everybody seems to offer the same thing, which is a ceramic plug-in with an 8.5 millimeter wire. And Dragonfly is the first one to offer it with a 10 millimeter wire. And they also offer it with heat sleeving added to the wire. So that saves us time on the track. That saves us time in the shop, which is just crucial. That can be the difference between winning a race or losing a race. And I'm just really thankful I don't have to burn my forearms so much changing plug wires now that I have this setup. And I don't have to sit there and make the plug wire itself. I don't have to cut it down. I don't have to add my own heat sleeve, my own heat shrink, all that stuff. That all takes a lot of time. And in drifting, we are only allowed 5 minutes to fix our car if we get into an accident in between battles. So I cannot change a spark plug wire at the moment with the old style wires in under 5 minutes. And with this, I can just plug and play. So it's just that much easier for me to do my job, essentially.
And good morning, Nick. What have you got that you can share with us right here?
Looks like you're on mute there, Nick.
Might be an issue with the headset. Sometimes those headsets can be funny. No, still nothing.
Nick,
Well, we'll take the pressure off of him, and we'll get back with him in just a second, guys. But Chris, going back to what Andy was saying, what's the biggest struggle for engine builders when it comes to, to plug wires? I mean, I'm gonna get into the other basic type of stuff, but I'm gonna hit you with that question, which is basically that 101 question. What's the difference, and what makes your product, better than anybody else's?
So with the new technologies that are coming out, the builders, depending on what type of packages that they're building, this gets from mild to wild. So if you're a street tuner, you may not have all the intricacies like what Nick is trying to build or what Andy's trying to achieve. So the builder has a unique set of ranges that they're trying to achieve, or a build, if you will. So with the advent of all the new electronics that are on the vehicles today, it's something we have to keep in mind that, EMI and RFI still plays a big part. No longer does it just interfere with our AM radios, and that's a funny static thing to laugh about. Now it's very serious consequences that could be had with ABS systems, airbag systems. So on the mild side of things, if you're trying to tune those vehicles, you still have to keep that in mind. So we've incorporated special windings and special alloys that we're using within our wires, and I'll touch on that momentarily. But moreover, to kind of answer this question in a bigger picture, think about not only do we have the complicated sensors that are now being implemented, but also the extreme popularity of forced induction, both from the OEM side and the aftermarket side. So now we have new header setups being built in the aftermarket side. Now you're having to relocate coils, having to reroute plug wires. So the biggest struggle there is trying to find something that's the right length, something that can fit nicely in this application without having to be a one-off build for you. So I think Dragonfly has really met that in the middle there and has been able to deliver both custom-made sets that are readily available on the shelf for these builders to be had. So if you do have to move those coils on, say, an LS, for example, you may use a taller valve cover just because of the rocker assemblies you're using. So the factory wire won't reach. It's already short to begin with, and it's already stressed. So we actually elongate the wire slightly, and we even make an even longer version of that. So you can still maintain those on the valve cover if you prefer, just have them up a little bit higher and be able to route the wires in a nicer manner to where you're not creating that stress. And also with heat buildup. So with forced induction comes heat. Under the engine bay, or under the hood rather, there's a lot of insulation that is noise canceling insulation, but it's also a heat barrier. It's keeping heat in the car, in that engine bay, but also compounded by the forced induction. Turbos specifically create tremendous amounts of heat. And if you're using heat blankets, that's fine, but it's still,
Okay.
you gotta think.
Mute's off now.
Oh yeah, you're off, Nick. So we'll come right back to you. But just to kind of finish that point too, with the product designs that we have, not only can we use 100% silicone boots, which are going to last a lot longer than the rubber, especially with these extreme heat cycles that these engines are experiencing. But if you get into a real high heat situation, and Andy's holding that up right now, one that has been burned, it looks like.
Yeah, it's having trouble focusing on it there.
Oh, that's the silicone.
There you go.
Yeah, and then now with ceramic boots in multiple different styles, whether it be a 90, a 30, 135, or a straight, to fit multiple applications. But these will stand up to about 2,000 degrees of heat. And you got to think, this is the thing that's closest to your header. So that's going to be the first thing that deteriorates on you. So after so many heat cycles, the last thing you want to do, especially in Andy's case, when you only have about 5 minutes to get prepared and get on to your next round, if you reach in and grab a hold of one of these wires and it has already burned or deteriorated through all of these heat cycles, your race is over. And unfortunately, you're not racing at the same location every week. So now you have that travel. And so you've just lost that one race, those very vital points that you need for that as well. So that's what we aim to do with Dragonfire, is not to set the world on fire. I'm not going to lie to anybody and say that we have the golden bullet, or the silver bullet rather, that's just going to compound your horsepower gains. But moreover, what we focus on is durability and longevity in our products. So that delivers not only to the consumer, but also to our suppliers that we supply with our products. So they know that they can stand behind our products and sell those confidently to their consumers and not have to worry about the problems and ramifications later.
All right, Nick, we've been waiting. You've been holding us in suspense. It's your turn. You have the floor.
Perfect. I have to follow that. So yeah, I work here at Brian Thule Racing. I work in product development. I also work along with our sales staff. Here we do a lot of R&D here. We're trying to build the best late model LS performance parts in the industry. Because of that, we do extensive amount of dyno testing. Everything from Gen 3, Gen 4 LS engines to LT direct injected engines. I can say personally, I've probably made over 1,000 pulls using the same set of plug wires that we received as a sample early on from Chris. We've had excellent luck with them. The durability is second to none. I was telling him the other day, when you put a wire on, how it snaps onto the plug or attaches to the coil on a coil near plug system. Yeah, they're just as tight now as they were the first time we put them on. We've had some that have inadvertently touched the header tube and may have burnt the rubber boot a little bit, and we have no misfire issues. They make comparable power to everything we've tested. We've just had no issues with them. In fact, we feel so strongly about them that we actually went ahead and brought them on, and now we sell those wires through BTR, through Brian Thule Racing. It's a cost-effective wire. We feel like it gives the customer a great value. It's a great value for us. Like we were talking the other day, ignition systems, they're like he said, there's no magic bullet to make a ton more power with one set of wires or one coil or one box to another. But a bad ignition system can definitely cost you horsepower, cost you the race. In our case, cost us, we spend thousands of dollars doing R&D, and it's all about time, and it's all about repeatability and actual data that's factual. No, we don't want any outliers. We don't want any, anything that we do that we're going to turn around and supply to a customer. It has to be 100% accurate, and we can't afford to deliver, or should I say not deliver on that promise by having inconsistencies in our testing. And I mean, I could say these things they've worked better than anything we've had on there so far in terms of longevity and use. Like I said, there's nothing we've tested so far that has not had that we haven't seen a negative impact on the wire, the way it's produced, or something due to heat, etc. These are the only wires so far we've tried on the dyno that we've yet to have that issue with.
So Andy, I would say that you have a lot like what Brian's saying here. You've experienced that because you were very quick and very articulate about how you get burned when you have to go down there and change a plug wire and all the problems that go with it. I can attest to that my own self back in the day when we ran 180-degree headers as juniors, and they were all pushed up around the block, and we didn't have all the really better angles that they've got today as far as the plug location. So that can be, it can be the kind of aggravation plus pain to go together if you're one of those drivers that not only drives it but works on it. So that's one of those things that robs time from the track. And that's another thing that you guys are all touching on, is that the amount of quality practice time and a non-worrisome race of all of a sudden you get halfway, 3/4 of the way through the race, or let's just say you get down to the final 5 or 10% of a race, and all of a sudden you start noticing the engine have a little bit of a miss when you're going to the right or back to the left, and it's all because it's burnt through that plug wire, that protection is on there, and all of a sudden now somebody's getting away from you that you could run from earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of wanted to talk about Chris was saying too about the plug wire end here. These ceramic plug ends, they take a ton of heat But right next to the plug-in, typically on the other sets of wires out there, there's no insulation. So you have this that can take thousands of degrees, and then you have a silicone wire that can only take about 600 that are right next to each other. They're attached to each other. So you have to add insulation to the ceramic plug-in. If you're burning up plug-ins and you're switching your plug-ins to ceramic because you're burning up plug-ins, you need to add insulation to the wire because the wire is right next to the plug-in. If you're getting that much heat here that you're burning the plug-in, you're definitely going to get enough heat into the wire and damage or at least burn the wire. So just that they offer this together is just so awesome, that the fact that I can just put a new plug wire on. And sometimes it's not even the plug wire that's failing. A lot of the other aftermarket companies that make the plug-ins, when the car gets really hot and you go to take a spark plug wire off, just say you're doing some sort of diagnosis, whatever, had nothing to do with the ignition system, the terminal itself will pull out of the ceramic end and remain on the spark plug itself. So you'll have the terminal stuck on the end of the spark plug here, and that thing will just slide right out. And then I have to replace a whole wire. So something that was, maybe just a quick check that we could have just popped the hood and pulled the plug wire off and checked something and put it back on, turns into a 15-minute ordeal, because now I have to pull out my bin of plug wires. I have to cut one to length. I have to add a plug end. I have to add the dielectric grease. I have to slide the rubber boot on there. I have to add the heat sleeve. I have to add the heat shrink to attach the heat sleeve to the end of the boot. Like it's a process, So the fact that they're going to save me time on the track is one of the biggest things that I like about Dragonfly right now. That's just invaluable. I mean, like I said before, it can be the difference between winning and losing. And when we drive 3,000 miles to get to a race, and we're spending, a lot of money to fly all our guys in, and just pay for the race fees and pay for tires and fuel and all that stuff, and then just to have a small failure that takes you out of the race like that is it's tough, and it takes a certain type of person to keep doing that over the years, But yeah, I'm just really happy Dragonfire's here making this product that nobody's made before. Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of changes over the years in the ceramic plug department, and I'm really happy that they're making that change.
Chris, we're getting some, excuse me, we're getting some questions from our attendees. And Rick Torme, he's got two questions right here on the get-go. What are your electrodes made of? And there are a few options in plug wire sizes in terms of diameter, which was one of the questions we were going to get into later on. But which size wire is best?
That's a great question. That's something that has been around for eons, really, since the advent of aftermarket wires. So whenever we're talking about something like 8.5 millimeter wires, which seems to be kind of the industry standard, or if you move up to something that's 12 or even say 15 millimeters in diameter, the diameter of the actual wire itself is not conducive to the power that it's going to produce or that it can handle. It's really the conductor inside of that wire that's going to determine that. And with Dragonfly Performance, we've actually made it very simple. We try to adhere to that KISS theory, to where the consumer and also the shop owners, because we understand that the shop owners have 100 different lines that they have to deal with. So it needs to be something that's easily understandable. And on the consumer side as well, when they visit the Dragonfly website, or if they visit their local tuner, builder, or retailer, that they can easily identify the products that are best for their particular situation, because bigger is not always better in any instance, whether that be plug wire diameter, cylinder head size, you name it, tire size. Yeah, it all boils down to what is your application, what are your specific needs. So we've actually developed 3 different series. A street series wire that uses a nichrome inner conductor that is better than the carbon core, like what you'll find in OE type wires. If you think about it, the OEM manufacturers are there as a business. They are providing us with a product, but they're not there to provide us with the absolute best product that there is, hands down. And on that same topic, we as aftermarket companies also cannot provide the absolute best product out there, hands down, silver bullet type of thing. It's got to be that happy balance, because resources are scarce. The prices for these resources can be very costly. So where do we find that balance? And whenever we're looking at OEM wires, carbon core wires are, think about planned obsolescence. And it does the job, for what the manufacturer wants. It lasts for as long as that warranty is there for. But after that, it's a consumable item and it's already planned in and it's baked in to the OE's plan. And it's just there for revenue generation. So it's not there for absolute performance. Whereas we can flip the scales on that and we see that there's a lot left on the table. So just by changing the inner core design from carbon core to even just nichrome in our street series, we've increased reduced the resistance in the wire, because the biggest gauge is the ohms per foot is typically how you always hear wires discussed. And even on a 2018, the C8 Corvette, the new 2021 C8 Corvette, it does have spiral wound wires, and we can go into detail on that later, but the actual ohm resistance on that is 2,200 per foot, whereas our street wires are 500 ohms per foot. So the efficiency is much, much better there already. So on your street vehicles, does that equate to horsepower? Not necessarily, but longevity again, where your ignition system isn't having to work so hard. And an item that we'll touch on later is how this all comes together as a package. And this is exactly why I brought Nick on as well. He could speak more to this. But think about it like this. So once we change the inner core from our street series to our sport series even, that sport series, now the ohm ratings drop from 500 to 150, because we're using a nickel copper conductor on the inside. And then once we move to our race series, now we can drop down to match the competitors like MSD, Moroso, and the likes with 40 ohm resistance. So ultra low resistance. But is that necessary in a street car? Not likely. Typically, the 40 ohm resistance would be something you would need for boosted applications where you have high cylinder pressures, lots of fuel being added to it. So typically, primarily race applications there. So to come right back around to the actual diameter of that wire, what you're looking at is the insulation. That silicone rubber on the outside basically is the primary makeup of that. And the perfect reason for that is in high heat instances, but also let's come back to the application. Do you have the room for a larger diameter wire? Unfortunately, some manufacturers have even gone to the point where they will increase the size of the connectors on the ends. Unfortunately, there's no need for that. If you use the proper materials like the silicone that we're using here, and you use the proper manufacturing techniques, in fact, our clamping devices are 300 tons for the silicone injection, which is about twice that of any manufacturer on what they're using. So not only is it a nicer product, but it's more durable. So you can actually have something that doesn't take up a lot of room, isn't going to interfere, especially with complex header designs, and it's going to give you the performance that you're looking for. So sorry for a long story on that, but I hope that answered the question that we were after.
Well, I want to do a little follow-up here. And again, everybody, it's just kind of like one of them jump ball questions, is that the spark plug wire is, in my opinion, the final part of the performance of the engine. You got to have good fire to get to the fuel source to make the spark, to make the horsepower. And that's what we're talking about. But what about the other extenuating parts of the harness? The battery, everything is providing the energy, for the alternator. How about the grounds? I mean, how many grounds, and what do you see as far as how it affects the engine performance, in regards to your product? Because one of the things I was curious about, I know back in the day, we were big on plug checks, and plug checks were doing two things: checking to make sure we had good fire at that point, and at the same time, the fuel that was getting to the spark plug itself. And we found a lot of times we could see when we were having not, I call it misfire almost, at a high RPM, that we had a bad plug wire. So how does that, come into play today? I mean, I know we're a lot more modern and we got better energy than we've ever had, but we've also still got the same common problem. You got to get the fire, correct, to mix with the fuel so you make the maximum and you don't waste any fuel that's in the cylinder.
Right. And you bring up a good point there, Jeff, and I'll jump in, and Nick and Andy, if you guys also have some things to chime in on, please do. But as far as to answer that question, I'm glad you brought it up, because that brings about the picture of the entire package. And that's what I really wanted to kind of direct the focus to as well, is it's not just this wire doing all of that. You know, the coil has to do its job. And then also the spark plug has to do its job. So if you're taking a wire like this and you're reducing the ohms, which is making it more efficient for that energy to travel from the coil to the plug, now that coil has to work less hard, if you will, or not as hard. Makes it more efficient. It's not going to degrade the internals for that coil and break it down prematurely, is what you'll also see on OEM type products. Well, again, coming back around to the OEM and their mindset, the OEM has built that coil to meet the specs that they built that motor for. They know that the motor has more potential to it, but that degrades its longevity. So they're after the dollar as far as, can we provide this product to the consumer and will it last X amount of years? That's their stick. Now we get to take that and say, now we have this excellent platform. Let's improve everywhere we can. So not only have we improved the wire efficiency, but with Dragonfly, something I should kind of back up on is our parent company is AIP Electronics, which is actually an OEM supplier as well. So we do produce OEM replacement products. So we have a catalog of over 2,000 products. We have a wealth of knowledge there from 2005 when we launched AIP. So we can harness that information and see what we can do to improve the coils with better windings, increased windings to a certain point. There is a point of where they will degrade. However, but if you change the windings, the bobbins, and just increase the performance efficiency of those, now it's delivering better power without having to work so hard, down through a line with least resistance. And then finally, as we get into the cylinder, we've just released a set of spark plugs as well that are iridium tips and copper core to deliver that power again more efficiently. So now this as a package works as a whole. So the point there, Jeff, is again, with the popularity of forced induction, both from the OEM side and the aftermarket, those cylinder temperature pressures are much greater now. You're getting more air in. The engine is essentially just a large air pump, more air in, more air out, more power, but you still have to fire the fuel that's inside that cylinder. And that's the one thing that's not talked about a lot. So how do you fire that and how do you get the optimum burn out of it? If you can widen the gap on your spark plug, you're going to get a more efficient burn. And you are going to increase the power that that mule can now produce. And if you have a wire that is, think about off-roading, if you have all the obstacles that it has to go over and navigate to try to get to the end result, it's going to be very slow and very inefficient. But like a drag strip where it's flat and straight, you have least resistance. So now you can get from point A to point B much quicker and easier. Well, now that you can harness that increased voltage power that you're putting through the wire, now you can increase the plug gaps and therefore increase your power as well. But you're going to find that ceiling, and kind of coming back to what you said, you get up into the higher revs, that's where you'll start to see the coils break down. They do fine in the street level, but if you're like Andy, you're on the rev limiter all day through this course and in other disciplines as well, that's where you're really going to see that coil degrade immediately and fall on its face, and you're losing a lot of performance in that respect.
Well, and I just want to add to touch on what Chris said. What we see is, we always talk about, horsepower versus cubic inch, so cylinder density. So, an engine that makes, a 400-inch engine that makes 2,000 horsepower has a lot more density and cylinder pressure than the street engine, like what you were talking about, that comes in a new C8 Corvette. And, to kind of reiterate how you talked about, how both of you, talked about the whole system, and how Chris talked about, like, let's say making spark plug gap wider for more power, on a turbocharged application, for example, you're never going to make the gap up to a point wider, because now you're trying to jump that gap. You can't get enough energy to jump that gap, and electricity always wants to follow the path of least resistance. And I'm sure, Jeff, you could attest to the olden days. You'd pull spark plug wires out and it looked like somebody took a pencil and drew on the porcelain, and you had carbon tracking. And that was, a perfect example of people that maybe didn't do their due diligence and do tune-ups on time, and the spark plug gap became too great. Now the ignition system is struggling to try and put enough current to jump that gap. Well, electricity doesn't want to go that way, so it'll go back out the other way and go through a poorly constructed spark plug boot, or a dirty, if it's got dirt in it or it got wet or whatever. So, and then there's a lot of things, there's, the dwell time in the coil, how long it takes to saturate it, at high RPM, that's something that may be different. Voltage plays a big, in regard to voltage, that plays a big role in that as well. The dwell time at 12 volts and the dwell time at 14 volts or 16 volts isn't necessarily, well, it's not necessarily, it is not the same. So there's so many things that come into play. It's hard to just say one system is right for everything. It's like anything else, you have to, I tell everybody, you have to know what it is you're trying to accomplish and figure out what it is you need to get to that goal. And that goal may look different than somebody else's, and the path to that goal will be entirely different. But yeah, the like I said, the OEM coils, they don't run, GM doesn't on a stock coil, like a stock D585 truck coil, the round truck coil with the heat sink that all the LS guys are familiar with. Those coils are, they're not immune to auto firing. They'll get to a point where if you try and raise the dwell time up too high, they'll just auto fire and they'll cause misfires. So we don't always recommend those for high horsepower applications. But on a low horsepower application, it's probably the best coil out there. So again, it's just kind of, it's a lot about what you're trying to do, and then hopefully having the right people to either point you in the right direction, so you don't have to learn by, trial by fire and hurt a lot of expensive parts in the process.
And the harken on that too, and or the parlay on that as well, is that I do profess I am not an electrical engineer. So we do have folks on board with us that we can put anybody in touch with if we need to identify a specific situation and try to dial something in, kind of like what Nick is talking about. So if you have a very specific application, then we can certainly dial that in and try to find the right coil setup for you, plug wire setup, and spark plug wire setup for you that will ultimately meet your needs. Now, for the greater part of the enthusiasts out there, however, especially with the advent of coil on plug designs, we can improve those. And for the most part, those will be a plug and play type setup. Now, once you start getting into higher boost applications and you're really pushing the limits of what your engine and what your system can manage, then that's when we need to have the phone call and talk individually to see what we can do there. And then Jeff, you had mentioned about grounding. And back in the old days, not to date any of us, but grounding was a big issue. And spark plug wires, whenever they degrade, is a ground. As Nick just pointed out, voltage will find the path of least resistance. So if you have materials that are breaking down on you, whether it be in the wire itself, the boot, anywhere along that path, it's going to find its way out. And then that's going to be your grounding situation. And so you're not getting the maximum amount of efficiency and voltage through that wire to where it needs to go, which is in that cylinder. So I can't remember if it was Pat at MSD years ago, he jokingly said, if you ever want to find the ground or a leak, just wet your hand and run it down the wire, and you'll quickly identify where that leak is coming from. So if you want to see if a wire is broken down, I don't advise you do that.
You volunteered to do that? Are
No,
you
sir,
volunteering to do that, Chris?
No, I've had my share of that. I'm done with that.
Oh, man. Real quick, we're just past the bottom of the hour and everything. And I just want to encourage our attendees that if we haven't gotten your question yet, just hang in there. I'm not overlooking you, but we're getting some good dialogue here. But some of these questions, like Jim Cohan, he threw one out there a minute ago. Because of what we've been talking about, how often would you change plug wires? And can you tell if a set of ignition wires are working properly? I mean, we kind of, I think, try to touch on that. But at the same time, I'm not too sure that the magic of wetting your hand and running down the plug wire is what we all want to try to do. Is there a more common sense and reasonable way we could do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always just a funny thing. And please, anybody, do not run your hand down that and try to do it with water. That hurts, especially with the improvement in the technology and the voltage that these coils are delivering now. It's not like the small MSD blasters of years past. those still produce good power, but the newer coils on modern cars hurt really, really bad if you do get hit by one of them. But nonetheless, yeah, you can check them. So the rule of thumb is, like in Andy's position, once a season, as you're refreshing the motor, it's always good measure to go ahead and just replace that. It is a consumable item. It is something that takes a lot of heat and abuse, not only through the rough terrains that some of these vehicles see, but also with the conditions. So chemical conditions, heat extremes, and so on. So if you are looking to replace them, this is one of the most overlooked items, along with your spark plugs, are the ignition wires themselves and coils. So they typically don't get replaced for at least 2 years or 2 seasons. But the rule of thumb here is to try to replace them once a season when you do your refresh on your motor. So if you are a competitive racer like Andy, you don't want to get to that next race and find out that, oh, I did have a connector that has separated or has burned because it's connected with the header. And then to test them, just simply use your voltometer. Check the ohm reading in it. Stick a probe in one end, another in the other end, and ohm it out. If it spikes, you've got a break. Or if it's not reading, it's got a break somewhere along the line. And you could also test this from the beginning as well. So once you get a set of our wires, you can test it right out of the box, see exactly that it's making the 500 ohms per foot, and then keep that in mind. Whenever you check them later, if you see a spike anywhere or an increase in the ohm ratings, they may be degrading, whether it be because they've been on there for so long or whatever the case might be. But certainly that's a quick and easy way to test that.
And to expand upon that, do not check for continuity, check for resistance. One strand of wire will show continuity, but we're checking for resistance for load. They carry load. They don't, it's not just, it's like take a light bulb, everybody does continuity checks, but if you do voltage drop and you do load tests, one strand of wire will not light a light bulb, but it will have perfect continuity. So just an FYI.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Nick.
Have you got any thing in that experience out there on the competition side that you've run into as far as when you change out or anything like that?
I'm talking to me?
So I was addressing that one to Andy.
Oh, okay.
Just from the competitive side.
What was that?
I was asking, what's been your experience through your applications and everything? Have you comfortable basically putting new sets of wires on, or do you change them out more than that? Because again, watching your application again, also when I was checking you out and I was watching some of your drifting stuff, I mean, it's pretty dang awesome. And at the same time, you guys are definitely up on the chip.
Yeah, typically we spend a lot of money just replacing random stuff that breaks during the season, and tires and fuel and travel and all that stuff. So spark plug wires, like Chris said, is something that does get overlooked a lot. And with the plug wire terminals pulling off so often on the ceramic plugins that we've been using, I'm pretty reluctant in taking them off the car because I don't want to make a new one and I don't want to have the plug end to come off. So I am a procrastinator in that sense. I'm also the type that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude. But it would make more sense if we change that every season, and hopefully, working with Dragonfly, we can keep doing that. And definitely, it's a recommended thing to do. I see a lot of people having coil problems on the track, coil issues, swapping out coils. I see a lot of guys trying to solve just random misfire issues by switching coils around and stuff like that. So reliability is a big issue that we have on track, and it's good to hear that from Chris about the consumable things, because that's one of the things that you kind of just keep driving until it breaks, and then you put that on the schedule essentially. So okay, well, that engine blew up in 2 years, let's rebuild the engine after a year and a half next time, type thing. So but that's not the way we should be doing it, because that costs us time on track. And like I said before, when you're traveling very far to get to these races and spending a whole lot of money, it's not fun to go out there and fail because the car didn't perform. We drive because we want to drive. We don't get out there because we want to work on the car, So yeah, I'm very thankful that Dragonfly is doing this, and that it's just gonna keep me on the track essentially.
And with that, with the
Actually,
racers in mind, we understand that they have a lot of other things on their mind. So things like the ignition system and all that gets
Mhm.
overlooked or just kind of put to the background until they really need to do something with it. So we take that in mind, and not were we trying to come out of the gate swinging with saying that we can increase horsepower by X amount and so on, but moreover that we can produce a product for racers like Andy who may neglect certain
Mhm.
things to make it very durable and longevity wise, make sure that that product's going to last for you. So it's not going to degrade prematurely for you. So everything from the Wacker silicone that we're using to the actual Kevlar from DuPont that we use inside of these, we are using very quality products throughout, and then just small things. So whenever you're looking at that brass terminal, it's got a spring lock on the end of it. We use that on both ends, and we also use the OEM style for the GM LS coils. So you get that nice satisfying click when you put
Yeah.
these in. But also, not only do you get that, but you just know that it's going to be there and it's going to stay there. So for those that are running Baja and any other short track that's very demanding on the chassis and everything else, it's a lot of vibrations because these are solidly mounted motors typically. So the motor is seeing a lot of vibrations. So the last thing you want to do is have a spark plug wire come flying off, get burned. So now you're losing the power from that cylinder, but also now you've just destroyed that spark plug wire. So that's why we actually put so much thought into the materials that we're using in our products, but also with our manufacturing capabilities. We are IATF 14649 compliant, meaning that our processes, our safety and resources are there, and that we have a process, and we're also ISO certified. So meaning that we have a third party come in and audit us to make sure that we have that repeatability. So while we're making these products for our end consumers, they know that year after year, from product style to product style, you're gonna have that same consistency throughout the entire Dragonfly product lines. So I think that's what's vital, and that's a key driver here for the shop owners.
We've touched on it several times about the heat and one of the problems. Andy's talked about it, you talked about it, so is Nick's touching on it. How do you go about testing this and determining that I know you talk about very, very highly about the end of the boot, 2000 degrees, but what about the rest of the plug wire, and how do you do that testing, again, you got to fail something to know you got what you think you got. So how do you go about doing that, and who do you work with to get that kind of feedback? Is it Andy or who else is it? Because I know you mentioned something about off-roading. And I'm sure Andy would be glad to go off-roading, but I haven't seen him. I didn't see anything showed me him doing that.
I would be very happy to do that.
Right. So we work with a
I know
wide
you probably
discipline
would.
of drivers and people like that. We would do our own internals. So again, coming back to like the Wacker silicone that we use, it's the highest grade silicone that you can get for these. And with that comes with about a 600 degree temp rating for these. And we've done that on bench testing, but moreover, we want to make sure that they actually do exactly what we designed them for and work in the real world. So that's why we work with Nick at BTR. He consistently has an engine going day after day after day, doing different cam swaps, intake checks, things like that. So he has a dyno with that motor going day in, day out, day in, day out. So those are just getting miles and miles and miles on these. Whereas Andy and other competitive racers that we work with around the country and across the globe, they're putting these to the extreme test, to the real world test. And that's actually Andy's wire. Where did it go? Andy's wire.
Hey.
I mean, this one does not have the silicone end on it. This is a different version of it, but that's where that derived from. And that's part of our capabilities too, and what makes Dragonfly such a potent supplier in the marketplace today is that we have extremely fast turnaround times, not only with prototype designs, but to be able to also replicate this and make it into a stocking piece, and with very small MOQs for our suppliers and our engine builders, but also make it cost effective for them as well. So, coming back to, our street series, while we can use pure silver as a conductor if we wanted to, the cost for that is just through the roof. But we found that happy medium in the middle of it. So, at $43 map pricing for a set of those wires, we feel that that's the best balance of performance and pricing. So you don't have to pay through the nose to have a great product for that. And then moving on up to, say, our Ultra 40 series or our race series, $69 map.
Right.
But moreover, it's like Smiley's Racing in Texas. They do roundy round racing. We've developed a special set of plug wires for them because of the cars that they're running these on. So there's special length for them with special boot ends. And then we've worked with them to formulate the perfect wire for them as well. On one set, they're actually using 10 millimeter wire without a heat sleeving, whereas left-hander chassis also does roundy round racing, but they use a different motor style and different header setup. So we're able to produce them stocking kits that are plug and play for their racers in their markets, again, with low MOQs and great pricing for them to make business, but to also fill that need. So now they don't have to do the cut to fit wires if they don't want to, but we do have those available should the consumer want or need a very trick custom setup for their own. But the idea here is to make the business model to where you as a shop owner or you as an engine builder, whenever you're making these packages, you look to replicate that. We want to help you replicate that. So we're going to work with you to develop those products for you specifically. So now you can have those on the shelf and you're no longer bound by what does Summit have or what does Jegs have or what does O'Reilly's have on the shelf. And I can only use those and I have to modify them. Now you as that business owner or builder can have the product that you need for your particular build.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, Chris Almond's been giving us several questions. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I want to make sure I get this in real quick.
Sure.
Andy, and that is Chris Almond from, wanted to know, does Dragonfly Performance Products have any business alliances with other performance parts companies? So it sounds to me like maybe you do, and maybe he's got some interest, possibly, maybe being one of your suppliers. So how does that work, Chris?
Yeah, thank you for that, Jeff. I do appreciate it. And that's really the parallel that I wanted to draw along with our mentality on how we go to business of developing our products and how that also translates into our business practices as well. We want to have a well-rounded package to deliver to our clients and to our consumers that are using our products. So on the client side of it, with the business to business end of it, we've developed it to where now the margins are greater than what dealers have seen in decades. We've looked at it and done a complete overhaul. We've made it very easy, and while we will sell direct to the public, we have a MAP policy. Our pricing on our website is always at MSRP, which is actually higher than MAP. We have a MAP policy. We strictly adhere to that and have all of our dealers adhere to that. And then we have the discounts that are just unbeatable today, but also the bespoke programs that we have available too, for whether it be private label, where we could do private branding with just the heat shrink itself, or a complete setup that's completely private labeled, depending on what your needs are. So we deal with companies all across the world in different facets or different levels, if you will, on what we're providing to them. So absolutely, we're open to talking with anybody and bringing them on and working together collectively.
All right. Andy, I apologize. I was wanting to make sure I got that. I had been holding Chris's question out more toward the end so that we got as much technical information as we possibly could, but go ahead and tell me what you got going on, brother.
No, it's all good. I just want to say about what Chris was saying. It's nice not to have to make those sacrifices, because a lot of times, especially like with the ceramic plugins on the market, them being an 8.5 millimeter wire, you're kind of making a sacrifice there to achieve your goals so that the plug wire just doesn't burn up. So you're losing performance in exchanging that for reliability, and it's just nice not to have to do that anymore. We have that in one package now. We have the performance, we have the reliability with the heat sleeve and the ceramic boot. We have the performance with the 10 millimeter wire and the 12 millimeter wire, like Chris was explaining, with the proper core. So it's really nice just not to have to sacrifice anything. We finally have something that's solid and performs well.
Thank you. Very well said. I mean, because again, we all are racers and we've all experienced the nickel and dime stuff that gets you in trouble more times than not. Mm-hmm. And not to say that plug wires are nickel and dime, but it's one of those elements that you don't really sometimes doesn't come to mind. I mean, I'm a mechanic. I know all the different parts, but I rely on my engine people more times than not to take care of that part of it. You take care of the engine and all the accessories that go on it, which happens to be the plug wires and distributor and, you know, coil, and I'll take care of the springs, the shocks, and everything else, the steering components. So it's a big partnership that has to be, I think, looked at. Again, the driver's the one guy that winds up with the brunt of it because he's out there having a ball doing what he wants to do, and all of a sudden something happens that somebody makes a mistake on, and you know, all of a sudden all of what you've been working toward is now for naught, and you don't get a chance to come on with the trophy. And let's just face it, that's what everybody's going for, is to have a good time, go fast, and bring home the gold.
Now that's a very important point to make. And I think that we're in this industry not because we were told to be here. We're all enthusiasts, number one. And then now as us here on EPARTRADE, we've developed ourselves into a profession, whether it be the business owners, the manufacturers, the engine builders, you name it. And that's the important part to understand is, so yeah, you don't want to be in that car and have something as simple as that, you know, be the thing that ends your weekend. And also you want to win in your business as well. So again, kind of coming back full circle as to how these two mesh with our mindset, we make sure that our dealers are going to succeed and win at the end of the day, because they're able to supply these quality products and they're able to make the money that drives that business and keeps them open as well. So we've got both ends covered, if you will, no pun intended.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, what I like is now you've explained to everybody, and Andy has overemphasized the fact he doesn't like making spark plug wires. So if he can pick up the phone and can call and get what he needs, he's a happy camper. And as far as the engine builders and people that are trying to put together successful combinations, they need to be able to get it out of the package and start plugging it in and realize that the resistance and everything like that is where it needs to be, so that you're not, you know, automatically when you fire it up, you got a problem, you know. And I've run into that early in the days when we were making our own plug wires and everything. We didn't spend enough time or the right way of putting a plug wire together, and you think you got a miss inside the engine, and it's nothing more than a stupid plug wire. And don't take that personal, guys, but I mean, you go down that road and you didn't do your due diligence and do it right. And right now, I think, you know, guys, everybody's listening here. Dragonfly,
It's okay, man. Jeff. It's still early,
I keep wanting to say Dragonfly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because Dragonfire is what we're doing. If you don't have quality product, something to finish it off, you can have the best money in the engine, you can have the best car in the world, you can have the greatest driver ever behind the wheel, and all of a sudden now you got a problem because the dang thing don't run like you want it to.
Right. And, you know, this is for another day and another conversation, but the coil on plugs, the increasing use of those through OEMs, that is the new spark plug wire dilemma that people are running into. As you increase the power and you're trying to squeeze more and more out of these engines, that is the new era as to what we're moving into. And that's something that Dragonfire is already on the forefront of. So we already have performance coils in almost 100 different styles that are available, and we're adding more and more every day. And a lot of that is driven through the feedback from people like Andy and Nick telling us what's in demand, what are they running into, and how can we help them fix this problem. So whenever we see these, we immediately tackle it. And again, with our speed of manufacturing and production and our backing with OEM, we have tremendous capabilities to be able to provide that new era of ignition technology. But we'll save that for another conversation because we're clearly running out of time today.
Well, yeah, we've had a great session here. And again, everybody who's been watching, thank you to all our technology that we've been shared with from the folks from Dragonfly and Andy and Nick and everybody. You saw on the green screen behind you, you can go to www.dragonfireperformance.com if you want more information. They're willing to talk to you. Do that. I want to thank ARP once again for being a good supporter as well as sponsor here for our webinars on EPARTRADE. And guess what? I'm going to turn this over to Francis. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure being with you, and good luck in the future. And Andy, bring home the gold, brother. Go out there and get you some.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Great
Thank you.
webinar, guys. We pushed Dragonfire's products back on the homepage of EPARTRADE, so take advantage of it. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted on the EPARTRADE platform and on our YouTube channel later on today. We will be back next Wednesday with Jeff's partner, Brad Gilly, and we are going to be talking horsepower with total seal piston rings and rotor. We're going to go deep technical on the equation between the relationship between those two companies. And so thank you very much. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use EPARTRADE as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to EPARTRADE.